Most beginner World of Warcraft guides will cover the basics. They'll tell you which race should you choose, which class should you choose, what are dungeons, what are raids, how does PvP work, things like that. But in this guide, I want to cover some of the lesser known tips that new players should absolutely know going into World of Warcraft. A lot of these tips will save you a huge headache in the long run and could very well save you from being scrutinized by other players as well. A lot of players of the game have been playing so long that it's easy to forget a lot of these little things that new players might not know. And so today we're going to cover the top 10 essential tips for new players in World of Warcraft. So first and foremost, and this is a huge one because it's a mistake that even I made as a new player, is don't pretend to know what you're doing. Always ask if you don't know what someone's asking you to do. And of course by this I mean mechanics. So if someone asks you to soak something, kite something, and you don't know what that means, it can be tempting to pretend to know what you're doing, because that way you can avoid being scrutinized for not knowing what that means. And unfortunately, you probably will be scrutinized for asking what something means, but it's still a better outcome than possibly causing a wipe, which could lead you to being kicked from the group or scrutinized even worse than you would have if you had have just asked what it meant. Hey man, do you mind running the bombs? Yeah, of course, no problem. There are plenty of nice players in WoW, but I would go into things with the expectation that people are generally not going to be that nice towards you not knowing an obvious thing like kiting or soaking, so it's good to go in with that in frame of mind. My next piece of advice is to bookmark Wowhead. This is huge. Wowhead is pretty much the overall best resource for anything there is World of Warcraft. Want to learn how to play your class better? Go to Wowhead. Want to learn how to do a specific quest? Go to Wowhead. Want to learn more about how a system works in the game? Go to Wowhead. You're going to find a lot of different World of Warcraft resources online, like Icy Veins, WoW Wiki, WoW Tavern, lots of good websites, but Wowhead is probably the best overall, and it provides some of the most accurate information. Especially when we're talking about the class guides, because the class guides on Wowhead are run by some of the most knowledgeable people on the specs. And I really want to follow up that point by also saying, really take the time to research your class once you've found a character you want to settle on and main. Look at what your best in slot enchants are, look at your best gems, your stat priorities, make sure you're doing your rotation right, and also follow a lot of the talent guides, because a lot of them have really solid builds that even if you want to build your own talent build, at least understand what makes those builds good. And I will note as well, obviously, don't worry about it so much during your leveling journey, it's more so once you hit the end game that these things start to matter more. For my third tip, and this is absolutely critical, download CurseForge. CurseForge is where you're going to get all of your add-ons for World of Warcraft. And as a new player, you might be thinking, I don't need add-ons. Why does that matter? Oh, it matters. Add-ons are critical to WoW, and there's a couple we're going to cover in this guide that I think are absolutely quintessential, especially as a new player. Add-ons cover a huge range of things in WoW, from changing your UI, helping you out with mechanics and telling you what to do, so if you want to ignore my first piece of advice and pretend to know what you're doing, at least something like Deadly Boss Mods can help you do that. And so many other things, like managing your collections, telling you auction prices, things like that. And we're going to cover more of the specific add-ons I think you should get a little bit later on. But for now, at least download the client you need to run and update these add-ons. Now, as for this next tip, it's going to be more focused on the gold making aspect of WoW. So first things first, enable auto loot. It's not enabled by default, so you're gonna have to go in and change it, but this is gonna make a big difference because basically every time you loot a mob now, it will just automatically loot everything off of them. And as a new player, you might think, why would I need to loot all this random junk? Well, that random junk can be vendored and you make gold off of it. So in the long run, after vendoring tons of stuff over a long period of time, you actually can make quite a bit of gold during your leveling journey. And I'm going to follow this point up by also recommending you download the add-on Auctionator. Auctionator is something actually I only started using a few months ago, and I wish I knew about this so much earlier, because basically what it does is every time you go talk to an auctioneer at the auction house, it will do a full scan of the auction house. And why that's important is because now every single item you mouse over that can be auctioned will tell you the current price of what it's being auctioned for. And this is absolutely huge because you could loot something having no idea what it's worth and just vendor it to a vendor, when in reality it could have been worth tens of thousands of gold just for maybe its transmog appearance. So overall, between these two things, they are going to help you a lot as a new player to start building up some gold and, making some money. My fifth tip is another add-on that I think is absolutely critical for new players, and that is Deadly Boss Mods. And I mentioned this earlier when we talked about CurseForge, but I think DBM is so important for new players because basically it gives you live on-screen commands of what to do during mechanics. So it will tell you, move out of this, go soak this, kite this, things like that. And it is so helpful if you don't know the mechanics of a fight, or maybe you just read about the mechanics but you don't really know what they look like on screen. It's gonna help you so much. And this is the kind of add-on that even experienced players will no question use. It's not like eventually once you learn the mechanics you can stop using DBM. DBM is always a tool that is there to help you no matter what level of experience you have. But another good add-on I will recommend if you want even more level of help is GTFO. And this will basically make a horn sound every time you're standing in something you shouldn't be. And as a new player, this can help you a lot. For tip number 6, and this is a little more open-ended, but don't be afraid to try other roles. It can be tempting as a new player to just only play DPS because it's the least intimidating spec. In a dungeon group, there's 5 people. There's 1 tank, 1 healer, and 3 DPS. So if you die, it's really not a big deal as a DPS. And it's a little pressuring for newer players to play a healer or tank because they're stressed about the level of responsibility they have in the group. And I totally can understand that, but at the same time, don't be afraid to try them. Yes, you might get scalded if you die as a tank, if you let somebody die as a healer, but you know what? That's part of the game. It's part of the learning experience, and some of these roles are so much fun. I've been tanking as Blood Death Knight for the past couple months now, and it has been so game-changingly fun to get to play something different, to not have to be staring at DPS charts all the time. I can just do my own thing, pull as many mobs as I feel comfortable, and have a lot of fun with it. If you get some people who flame you for letting someone die, who cares? Let them say what they want to say, just ignore them and, keep learning. For my 7th tip, and this is a pretty common mistake even as a more experienced player, is be sure you read your talents. And when I say that, I mean don't just blindly copy and paste a build from your class guide on Wowhead, but actually take time to read through them and understand why the build works. This way it'll just provide a better understanding of your class, and you'll understand ability interactions a lot better and why certain things work the way they do. That way, if you want to tune your class a little bit to your preference, you can do that, and you'll know what you want to switch around because you know what does what. For this next point, I would recommend highly as a new player that you at least familiarize yourself with basic terminology in-game. There's a lot of different terms that are used both in chat when you're talking about trading, so things like want to sell, want to buy, looking for group, things like that. And then there's also a lot of mechanics-based terms you'll want to know as well. So like I was talking about a little bit earlier in the video, you're going to want to know what aggro means, what kiting is, what it means to soak something, things like that. And while I could name all the basic terminology here in this video, that would probably make it like 20 minutes long, so I'm actually just going to link this Bellular video that you should watch in the description below, because he does a really good job of going through all the basic terms as it is. If this isn't your first MMO, then you might be familiar with a lot of these terms already, but if you're coming from, say, FPS games, then you're going to want to learn a lot of these terms. For my 9th tip, and it's not absolutely critical you do this right away, but start getting used to using keybinds. And what I mean by this is by instead of clicking on your abilities, which you might be tempted to do if you're new to RPGs or MMOs, but instead to bind your abilities to keys on your keyboard, or get yourself an MMO mouse and keybind your abilities to the buttons on the side of the mouse. Because the problem is if your mouse is busy clicking on abilities, that means you have to use your keyboard to turn your character, and it's a very well-known thing in WoW that you should absolutely turn your character with your mouse, not your keyboard, as it gives you much quicker reaction times to mechanics and such. So even if you just start out with just using the basic numbered keys that most of your default abilities will bind to, and then sort of build up from there, that's a really good starting point. But at the end of the day, I absolutely cannot recommend getting an MMO mouse enough. It frees up keys on your keyboard so much and just makes all of your abilities nice little buttons you press with your thumb on the side of your mouse. It's best as a new player you start getting used to keybinds from the start, because trust me, when you get used to clicking on abilities, it becomes that much harder to get used to keybinds. Now for my 10th and final point, this one's going to be a little more open-ended, but at the end of the day, just remember to have fun. Don't feel like you're in a rush to catch up to other players or that you're behind on content, because there is so many years of content behind World of Warcraft that honestly just go with it at your own pace and have fun with it. Take time to try new classes, because as a new player, you have so many class choices that knowing exactly the playstyle you enjoy is pretty much impossible right from the beginning unless you try a bunch of different things. And also just don't let this information overload you. I know it's a lot to take in, but just go through each point and sort of slowly start applying it to your gameplay, because believe me, all of these 10 things are going to make a huge impact to you as a player. And that's it. Ultimately, the goal of this guide is really just to give you a bit of a head start as a new player. A lot of these things are things that basically every experienced player knows, but you're not going to know about right from the beginning of playing the game. These are sort of things you learn as you go and as you talk to other people during your time playing the game. So if you know these things ahead of time from this guide, then it's just going to give you a bit of a boost as a player. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next one.